So much has been made about UCLA's Big Ten schedule coming up in the next 2 seasons, at least for football. But what does that mean for travel and recovery? I talked about this before, but let's revisit this on this episode of Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, getting episodes back out there once again. Thanks for making this your first listen every day, and thanks for tuning in each and every day and downloading and listening, whether it be on Spotify, it's free wherever you get it, or it's on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get into this scheduling recovery discussion, right? A lot of it has been made about UCLA moving to the Big Ten. They have to go play teams across the country. Their closest rival in the Big Ten, other than USC, is Nebraska, or one of their closest flights, I should say, is Nebraska, who's 3 hours, and the Iowas and all those things. So between those couple of teams, it's still a 3-hour flight as opposed to a 1 to 2, whatever it may be when you're playing the Pac-12. The recovery will be an important part of what UCLA has to offer to these new incoming athletes for the class of 24 and beyond as the new Big Ten life becomes more and more real as we get closer to 2024. I was kind of doing some research over the last couple of days, and I've talked about this article before, but I found 2 articles discussing about how Hawaii had gone through their recovery process and how they deal with the travel. Because remember, they go over the ocean, they go over the water just to come to the mainland to play some games. And sometimes, even though UCLA is flying to Hawaii in the upcoming season, not 23, but in 24, beyond all their Big Ten scheduled travel, they've got to learn maybe from Hawaii. And I found an old article dating back to 2016 and one from last year where it talked about how Hawaii was redefining the road game. Back when Nick Rolovich was the head coach, I know he had a whole saga during COVID and everything, but he was a one-time Hawaii head coach. Hawaii one time, they opened the season back in 16 in Sydney. They flew all the way from the islands to Sydney, a direct flight. Then they had 7 road games, I believe, that year in 2016 or close to it. They had almost 50,000 miles of air travel for 7 games just to play in the football season. And UCLA, while they have a bonkers road schedule, probably won't get anything as ridiculous as Hawaii had about 7 years ago. So what did they do then in the recovery 7 years ago? And then we'll compare what they can do today. Hawaii had what they called these compression pants. I'm not sure what they do now, but they would wear tight compression pants to try and get those legs, active in terms of making sure the athletics, the academics, everything in between was working. This is what Rolovich said. He said, "We've purchased some tights for traveling on the airplane that a bunch of guys will wear, and they're sort of lower body compression sock on steroids." And then their starting quarterback at the time said, "Sleep in when you can." Those were quotes to the New York Times in an article 7 years ago. So they would wear compression pants to have almost compression-like socks, but on their legs when they would travel. And sleeping in was a key part of it. Now, dating back to an article they talked about last year, was most importantly when you get these big athletes on planes flying over the place like football and all these other sports, getting leg room on planes, booking as early as possible. And the big thing is, how are they going to handle the academics? Hawaii sometimes, when they have to play on the road, all these years and all these times later in the season, they have to bring their academic counselors. UCLA might have to double, if not triple, that staff going forward on the road, not just for a football or a basketball, but for these other sports when they're on the road, missing classes in an up-tempo quarter system that they operate in this day and age. How you have to deal with, how do you recover? Well, it comes to sleeping in. It comes to having all your electronics charged in. And how do you recover? Well, for football, Chip Kelly's been somewhat known for one of the best minds, not just offensively, but your conditioning and the recovery process. And I believe one of the transfer recruits this year mentioned that was part of his decision-making when coming over to UCLA. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was Kyle Ford with that quote, but I could be a little mistaken there. But how do you work around all the extended schedule? Remember, you have Darius Muasau, who was a former Rainbow Warrior, come to Bruin, so he's got an idea of what that travel's like. And while his career won't be 30 years long for UCLA, it's learning how can UCLA, well, they're going to get a lot of money. Can they do it on, a budget, if you will? Can they do it while recovering at a proper rate when you've got to go play sometimes? Go to Rutgers for a football game and come back. And you got to go fly to Hawaii, LSU, and all these things. While those games might not be happening in the same year, you get my point. The travel is going to pick up. A little bit easier possibly for football, but when basketball goes, when women's tennis goes, how do you do it? Well, you've got to be able to find ways to be success. One of the assistants with Hawaii talked about having different timing of matches to accommodate for travel and being able to recover after games, and sometimes meeting in the middle, all these things where you have middle non-conference games. That's not going to be the case. UCLA has to go play some true road games, and knowing they want to play and be able to play in one of the toughest top conferences, get that top dollar. This is what you have to sacrifice, going and finding different scheduling possibilities, which is what Martin Germond, who said in a statement, I believe last year, talked about how the schools like UCLA and SC would explore scheduling accommodations in the Big Ten. We saw their football schedule released. Now, how will they actually put it week by week? Will they completely screw over UCLA? Will they make it a little easier in terms of back-to-back trips across the country? I'm not entirely sure at this moment until they put dates to those conference games in the Big Ten. But just reading different things, how Hawaii used to have compression pants, how UCLA will have to be creative in getting different traveling accommodations going forward. So it's just food for thought on this Friday, June the 16th, as we get ready to rock and roll. We're going to come back, talk about Jaime Jaquez Jr. LA Times wrote a great article on, and Ben Bolch talked about his NBA prospects. Is he a first rounder? Is he a second rounder? As we get closer to the draft, it's going to get even more important for Jaquez's NBA hopes, where he gets drafted, who takes him. What are his intangibles? We'll tell you all about that and more, but not before I tell you once again about Birddogs. Because, hey, Birddogs, they make you look good. They use stretch khaki shorts fabric that gives you a sculpted look with your legs. You look absolutely fantastic when you wear them. And, they kind of do the same thing. It's like a Lululemon, but they fit way better. They do the same thing. They fit way better than regular shorts. For me, I'm putting on shorts. Every time I'm not wearing Birddogs, I feel like I'm pulling up my shorts, right? I'm just like, why are these shorts almost falling off my hips, even though they fit me? Why do I have to pull it super tight or wear a belt? Birddogs come together. They have anti-stink sweat. So while they do fit nice and snug, they feel good. They can handle the heat and the humidity. You can wear them on a date. You can wear them any situation, and you're going to look good doing so. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Again, once again, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and get all the good stuff today. Yeah, take a look at that website right there, birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, and you'll get your Birddogs today. Cruising back to Locked On UCLA, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer with you guys. And hey, Jaime Jaquez Jr. coming up, maybe one of the better UCLA NBA prospects the Bruins have had in recent years. I know with Johnny Juzang and other players, Amari Bailey, we hope to be that high-level NBA player eventually in his career. But at the moment, it is a Jaime Jaquez Jr. who is leading the charge for the Bruins going to this 2023 NBA draft, the draft being on June 22nd, coming up in about a week from the posting of this episode. So kind of reading what this feature that Ben Bolch put on, the idea is Jaquez, who had come to UCLA coming out of Camarillo, had to scrap for minutes, wasn't fully heralded as highly as maybe some might have expected him, as he ended up being one of the top scorers in UCLA history, top 8 in the top 10 all-time scoring list for UCLA, and that is an expansive list of all-time Bruins when you score a lot of points. A Pac-12 Conference Player of the Year, a part of a team that made a Final Four run. And while I'm not sure what the number retiring situation is for all the Bruins, I know Jaquez hasn't done enough to do that, but he is a legendary honorary Bruin for his 4-year career where it spanned a rebuilding phase into a successful end in his career in terms of bringing them back to relevancy over his 4 years, individually using his hard grit, battling his way on the court for Mick Cronin, and becoming a key weapon, not just offensively, but rebounding and defensively, which is what Ben Bolch did in his research when writing this article. Talking about, hey, it's almost like when you go to school, right? You feel like you're in middle school, you go to high school, you get to the top of 8th grade, and next thing you know, you got to start as a freshman in high school. Same thing to college. You go as a freshman, you build your way up, and then you go to work, and then you kind of build your way up step by step up the ladder. And now here's what Jaquez is doing the same thing, going to the NBA draft, probably doubted. He doesn't have the best shot, has some really good footwork, some underrated athletic ability, as people saw during the combine with his vertical leap and everything in between. If he can bring those skill sets and improve his shooting, he could be a very good NBA option off the bench for somebody in the first few years of his career. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look. There was an anonymous source, an NBA executive who spoke in an anonymity because Ben Bolch couldn't get him on the record because, hey, you can't speak about these draftees before the draft actually occurs. So what this guy said is he expects Jaquez to be a 17 to 25 pick range, from the 17th pick to the 25th pick as a guy in the first round. So I talked about this a few weeks ago. Would Amari Bailey or Jalen Clark or even the likes of Jaime Jaquez Jr. be a first-round pick? Jaquez was floating between early second and late first. Now, based off his workouts in between the combine, he's been shifting up to a mid-first rounder. That 17th pick, funny enough, speak of Los Angeles, who's got that pick in the 17th part of the first round? That's the Los Angeles Lakers. Something to think about and food for thought. And then he's been worked out by 9 separate NBA teams, specifically in the article mentioning the Clippers, who have the 30th pick in the first round, which would just be outside that guesstimated range from the NBA executive that spoke to Ben Bolch. But one of the things they talked about was Jaime Jaquez Jr.'s dependability. His dependability, just being there, winning all the drills, which is what he brings, the intangibles defensively. The word intangibles was also used. And you always see this word thrown around. But all UCLA fans, whether you're watching this or if you saw some Jaime Jaquez Jr. games over his career, especially at the latter part, he's got this ability to just grind his way into success, just out-heart you, out-hustle you into a successful win or just a good performance, even on nights he's not feeling it, and becoming more of a vocal leader. Well, that's a little different going to an NBA team, a different play style, different skill set, and depending on the team he goes to, he'll be needed in a different way. But it was noted that his shot has improved, and with everybody getting Jaquez on their radar, don't be surprised if he goes a little bit earlier than some might expect, mid-first round, or, dare I say, he could be an absolute steal in the early second round if he slips and falls. I hope he gets a first-round contract, but even if he slips and falls, he will be an important piece to an NBA team. And dare I say, wouldn't it be funny if he stays in LA, even if it's a Clipper, when they move to the new dome, or even, dare I say, the Lakers, although it doesn't seem like he's anywhere on their radar from what I've seen. Jaquez, that would be a good option, and we hope him the best for being a great UCLA Bruin. So we're going to cruise on in Locked On UCLA. It's the last and final segment here today. So speaking of Big Ten scheduling, UCLA women's basketball announced a couple of big schedule updates for their new season, one including a big little mini tournament or big game series in terms of the Hall of Fame Classic they'll be playing in, and they announced their season opener. We're still waiting for UCLA men's basketball to announce a couple of more dates, but they're still looking for their full roster to be completed. So as much as we want to see little pieces of that schedule be dropped, we know they're going to Maui. The women's dropped their home opener. It is going to be against Purdue on November 6, 2023, who is, as they're dubbing it, a future Big Ten foe against the Boilermakers, who they haven't played at home since 2004. And then they're 1-2 all-time against Purdue. So it'll be fun to play the Boilermakers, who are a pretty scrappy team, beat some of the better teams in the Big Ten, and it's life getting prepared for playing a Big Ten team. Well, it's not exactly getting shipped across the country in early November to go play Purdue. This is just kind of interesting to see how in this schedule, I almost wonder, did the Big Ten kind of make this happen? Is this what's going to happen, or what was going to happen moving forward? I wonder what it would look like in the men's basketball schedule for UCLA if they have to pick up a Big Ten game. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But Purdue coming to UCLA will be a fun matchup. The Bruins last beat Purdue December 5th in 2004 in their only ever win against the Boilermakers. So can the Bruins win? I love to see it. And then they also announced the Hall of Fame Classic game, where they're going to be part of the 10th Annual Basketball Hall of Fame Women's Showcase, where they're going to play Florida State almost a month after after their home opener in Mohegan Sun Arena out in Connecticut during the 2023 Women's Showcase. So UCLA is going to have a fun thing. They announced 2 big events. This is what Corey Close had to say. The bottom line for us is that we feel like we're going to have a high-level team, and in order to realize that potential, you've got to play against the very best in high-level opponents. To have the national coverage as well as a great competition all in one place, not only does it help us prepare to be at our best, but it also helps us grow the game. We're thrilled to be a part of it, was Corey Close's quote. And I believe on Twitter, something I saw the other day was the arrival of Lauren Betts. Remember, UCLA's been getting some big-time recruits for the class of 24, but they brought in the class of, I think, 22. They brought in the class of 22's biggest recruit and with the number 2 recruit with Jones. So you pair some of the better recruits together for this class of 23, and we're extremely excited for this UCLA women's basketball season. Don't forget, Charisma Osborne coming back, Cam Brown coming back. You've got so many different players coming back into a team that could easily be amongst the shortlist to win the Pac-12 and be an immediate contender this year in women's college basketball. Will they be better than UConn? Will they be better than a Caitlin Clark and an Iowa and any other team that decides to jump? I mean, South Carolina proves they're amongst the top 3 or 4, even without Aaliyah Boston anymore. She starts her WNBA career. But the Bruins, we should be very excited for their women's basketball season this year. Men's basketball will grind their way into some sort of success, I'd expect. But women's basketball, there is certainly some expectations this year, and we'd love to see them get to the Elite 8, host the first 2 rounds or the first round, and then get to a closer regional, get to a Final Four, and win those games, and dare I say, win a national championship on the women's side, because that will be important, and that'd be fun in their last year of the Pac-12 to say goodbye Stanford, goodbye everybody else except for SC, and try and do something special with the team that you got veteran leadership. You've got the youth with the year under their belt, a new big post player coming in to give them some true size in the paint when they struggled in those couple of losses to a Stanford, to South Carolina. All these things coming together for UCLA in what expects to be a fun season, which opens November 6th against the Purdue Boilermakers, who are a pretty scrappy team themselves with some good talent there. And they'll play Florida State in the Hall of Fame Classic, and we'll see what the rest of the schedules look like as well. That's going to do it for Locked On UCLA today. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, telling you to become an everyday listener of the Locked On UCLA podcast. In the summer, we are kind of doing a 3-episode per week thing. We'll try and get as much content out as we can, but out and about, 3 episodes per week. We'll have a new episode tomorrow talking more football, especially football recruiting, looking at DBs, because the Bruins didn't bring in any true DBs this year in the portal or in their recruiting class. So we'll talk about that as true quarterbacks in the next episode for Locked On UCLA. Well, why is that the case? What's going on there? Stay tuned for the next episode of Locked On UCLA. And as always, get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fights. This has been Locked On UCLA. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for your support. Go listen to it. Go watch it. Thanks for everything. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off, and thanks for tuning in. We'll have more content coming up soon.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network,